Welcome to the Trump Breaking News Network, your daily source for up-to-the-minute Trump news. Join us today and every day. Here's today's news.
This is TBNN.
The face of Republican evil, it's not Donald Trump. In the hellish months since Donald Trump's inauguration, a dark parlor game of sorts has cropped up in liberal circles that I like to call "Would an impeachment even be worth it?" With the full acknowledgment that it's unlikely to happen as long as Republicans are in charge. Participants still sip cocktails and ponder out loud the question of whether booting out Trump on his butt would be enough to save our democracy, considering the fact that the Republican slimeball taking his place would invariably sign a bunch of retrograde legislation setting back this country decades. These discussions break down into two camps: those who think Trump presents a unique threat to our democracy and replacing him with someone in the succession line, like Vice President Mike Pence or House Speaker Paul Ryan, would at least preserve our democratic norms, and those who think the corruption started long before Trump and has spread throughout the Republican Party, rotting it from the inside out. Consider me in the latter camp, which makes me kind of unpopular in these discussions. Unfortunately, my view that the Republican Party as a whole is irredeemably anti-democratic has been borne out, yet again, in the process that Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has put into motion to destroy the Affordable Health Act, a process that will likely take out the U.S. healthcare system as we know it. One could even argue that bog-standard Republicans, under the leadership of Ryan and McConnell, represent a bigger threat to our democracy than Trump, possessing as they do more competence and cunning than the TV-addled overgrown toddler in the White House. As Heather Digby Parton, writing for Salon, recently detailed, McConnell has arranged to have the Senate version of the House's American Health Care Act, which the Congressional Budget Office estimates would ultimately leave 23 million Americans uninsured, written in secret, with no hearings, no public discussion and no real debate. Republicans are barely even pretending the reason is anything other than the obvious: the bill is so terrible that it defies the will of people of all political stripes and sensibilities, whom legislators supposedly were elected to serve. When called out on this obvious fact, Republicans are just smirking or squawking fake news but not actually offering any contravening evidence. McConnell's contempt for the processes, much less the defining principles, of democracy couldn't be more apparent. But he doesn't really care. No doubt the election of Trump helped confirm the rising sense among Republicans that they can wipe their collective butts with the Constitution, flip the bird at their constituents and not really worry about losing many seats. Republican voters might not like it, but they like liberals, black people and feminists even less, so they will show up and dutifully vote against the Democrats every time. Losing health care access isn't great, but for conservative voters, admitting that liberals might have a point is a hell from which there is no escape. This Republican contempt for democracy was evident long before Trump started grasping for the presidential nomination with his stubby orange fingers. McConnell was so unwilling to accept the legitimacy of Barack Obama's two substantial presidential election victories that the Republican leader refused to acknowledge Obama's right to nominate a Supreme Court justice after Antonin Scalia's death. Not only did that work out perfectly for McConnell, he got Neil Gorsuch onto the High Court, instead of rightful nominee Merrick Garland, but it proved once and for all that bedrock conservative voters don't care about niceties like the rule of law or government by the people. They just want to punish women for having sex and gripe about Obama phones, and don't care if the price paid is the ultimate ruin of this country. Trump didn't make Republicans corrupt. They were already there. That's why he hasn't really needed to do any arm twisting or commit blackmail, no matter how much he'd like to, in order to get a GOP-controlled Congress willing to look the other way when presented with a growing pile of evidence that something weird is going on with Trump and the Russians. It's easier to not care if Russian intelligence is actively seeking to subvert U.S. elections for those who aggressively try to deny voting rights to millions of Americans, especially people of color and younger voters who insist on voting for Democrats. At this point, the Republican rejection of democracy is an established fact. The only question is how far the ruling party is willing to take it. The anti-democratic, secretive process surrounding the GOP's health care bill suggests there may be no real limit.
That's the news. Join us here every day. Be sure to subscribe and click the bell. See you next time.
This is TBNN.